शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। So welcome to the session today. Today is a special day. Can somebody tell me what is special about today?
Today is Independence Day.
One by one. What is special today?
Indian Independence Day.
It is Independence Day. So it is definitely, you are all right. It is Independence Day. It's a very special day for not only all the Indians, but all the people who come from the Indian ancestry all over the world. They may be of any citizenship, but those who are of Indian origin, for them, it's a very important day. So I was in a little bit of a dilemma of whether to continue with our regular flow. We were talking about the age of invaders and how Indians defeated the invaders over the period of about 300 BCE to about 100 of the Common Era. So that fifth unit. So I was thinking whether to continue with that or to kind of take a detour a little bit and talk about some various topics, themes around the uh, colonial times and the Indian independence. And of course, very important thing is tomorrow we have a special class where we have a guest lecturer, Shri Bharat Chandrasekharan ji. So he's a very learned person, scholar, researcher, who has, with his camera, gone to hundreds of villages in Tamil Nadu, taking pictures of the temples and studying the architecture and history through those temples. So he's going to be here tomorrow. And I was also thinking maybe third option was to prepare you all a little bit about the history of Tamil country, Tamil Nadu, the culture, traditions, of course, Hindu traditions, how those took a special shape within the Tamil Nadu area. But ultimately, I decided that let us keep it more about Indian colonial history, British history time period to celebrate the 15th of August, the Independence Day of India. So today will be very loose. It will not be very, I would say, like a typical class. And I hope we can have some conversation, some dialogues. We can talk openly, have a discussion on anything related to these. So it will therefore not be very tightly scheduled agenda. It will be here and there. So be prepared with this, and also be prepared to bring up some random questions. We can let's all talk about something. Okay, so that's the idea.
Okay.
Okay.
So with that, there is a very famous shloka from the Vishnu Purana. Okay, this shloka is from the Vishnu Purana. Very beautiful shloka. Gayanti Deva Kilagita-kani Dhanyastu te Bharata Bhumi Bhage. स्वर्गापवर्गास्पद हेतुभूते
Bhute
भवन्ति भूयः पुरुषाः सुरत्वात् So as I said, this is from the Vishnu Purana, and it says that even the gods sing, Gayanti Deva, they sing the praises, songs of praises for the earth land of India, for the Bharat Bhumi. And they say that blessed are the people who are born in that Bharat Bhumi, which is a gateway to the Swarga, heaven, and Apavarga, which is beyond the heaven also. So, to reach the heaven and beyond heaven, the humans take birth in the land of Bharat. So, can somebody tell me what is one major historical event that happened in year 1492? Anyone? Come on, all of you know it.
Constantinople's name was changed.
No. Close, but no.
Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely. Christopher Columbus arrived without knowledge the land of America. Where exactly does he arrive? Where did he reach? Did he reach New York?
Was it Cuba?
Hispaniola
Cuba.
Island.
Yeah, I thought it was Cuba.
Hispaniola.
It was
All of you are close.
Cuba.
Absolutely, all of you are close. He reached the Caribbean islands. Yes, Caribbean islands towards the Central and Southern America, towards the middle. So he reached the Caribbean islands, and then he realized that, what did he realize? Where was he going? Before forget about what he did he realize. What was he looking for?
He was looking for India.
So Christopher Columbus, he was looking for India, somebody said. Yeah. And so Christopher Columbus was from which country?
He was from
Yeah, Spain. He was born in Italy.
That is absolutely correct. He was not from Spain. He was from Italy. He was an Italian. He was an Italian who was hired by the King of Spain. For what?
To find a path to Asia.
To find the path to India. That is absolutely correct. Somebody said to find India. Was India lost? Was India not known? No. So the correct answer is also it was very well known. Of course, India was very well known. Naturally, India was extremely well known. More than any other part of the world, India was world famous. It was very well known. So, but again, can we stay on this question for a little bit? Why did they have to find the path to India again?
For the knowledge.
But they already had connect with India, right? For spices, did
The
they not?
Ottomans were blocking
easy to travel.
Perhaps it was forgotten.
It was not forgotten. And spices they were already getting.
Find the easy path.
There
There was something wrong. That is correct. Yeah, there was
the
something
Ottoman
wrong that was
Empire
happening.
was blocking the.
There you go. There you go. Ottoman Empire was blocking the road. Yeah. So let's understand that. Let's understand that a little bit. Christopher Columbus was an Italian. He was a professional navigator. Navigator in the sense he could find the path on the ocean. Okay. Now he was an Italian, and he was hired by the King of Spain in the year 1492 to take a ship, in fact not just one ship but a set of ships and a few trained sailors along with him, and go find a new path to India. Path to India was already known. It is nothing wrong in the path to India. They, of course, Europe and India were trading since the Roman Empire, even before. If you carefully listened to Srimati Sahana Singh ji, even Pythagoras, who was in Greece, he came to India to learn mathematics, did he not? Alexander the Great, we have seen so many times. He even from Greece, he came all the way to India on the borders of Punjab, where, you know, soon after he died, after he was attacked. Yeah, so Europeans have known about the road to India, famous Silk Road, for ages. But something was wrong, something had gone, and I think somebody gave the answer also correctly. Ottoman Empire. So we will talk about that. And you should know that Christopher Columbus was not the first one, nor the last one, definitely not the only one from Europe who was trying to find a new path to India. So many Europeans throughout the century of 1400s, especially after middle of the 1400s, were looking for a new path to India. Okay, they were looking for a new way to reach India. So as you can see, there was a person called Niccolo di Conti, who happened soon after another person called Marco Polo, who you don't see on that slide, but there was a sailor called Marco Polo, also from Italy. Okay, Marco Polo also came to India. He came to India in 1300s, and he has written about a lot about India. He went to China also. He spent more time in China than in India, and he has written about India. But he did not come through this path. Okay, so he came through different route. He went by road to China, and then from China he came via sea to India, and then came back to China via sea. So different route. Niccolo di Conti, he was the first one. Again, not this route. He came through a different route. He also reached India. Then you had a Russian named Afanasy Nikitin. He also came to India roughly about 20 years before Christopher Columbus sailed out. Okay. Then you had Portuguese. So Christopher, an Italian hired by the Spanish king. Similarly, the Portuguese king. So Portugal is a neighbor to Spain in Europe, and another naval power of that time. They hired a Portuguese person by name Pero da Covilhã. Okay, he was a spy also, and he was hired just 5 years before Christopher Columbus to go and figure out how the route might be, and not just the physical road or ocean paths to India, but also how the conditions are. Are we able to successfully go there or not? So he attempted to go to India as well. And then, of course, we see that he tried several times. Okay, and then finally, Christopher Columbus was also hired by Spanish king, and he's unsuccessfully. I mean, he was successful accidentally in reaching America, which he was not trying to go to, but he did reach there. And again, Portuguese, within the 6 years of Christopher Columbus reaching America, Portuguese king hired a Portuguese person by name Vasco da Gama. Okay, and along with two of his friends, Niccolo and Bartolomeu, he sailed out with a set of ships, and he goes to India. Actually, he reached the south of Africa. And so in the south, let me open the map so that you can realize what I'm talking about. Just a moment, it's loading. My internet is so horrible. Very sorry. Okay, there. That's better. Okay, so here is Portugal. Next to the Spain is Portugal here. And here is Spain. You all can see my screen, correct? Yes, can somebody tell me? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Wait, it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's loading.
It's loading still.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
here is Spain and here is Portugal next to each other. So earlier, the around say 1400s or before, what used to happen is the ships from India loaded with goods, they used to leave from the coastline of India, which is a huge coastline, right? From Gujarat on the west to Kerala in the south, to Andhra, Odisha, and Bengal in the east. This big coastline, ships from multiple of these ports, they used to sail out. They used to go like this into Arabia. This water body here between Iran and Saudi Arabia, this is called Persian Gulf. Okay, so the ships used to go since the Mohenjo-daro times, Harappa times. Ships used to go into this Oman port, okay, or here near this place, and from there they will go in. They will enter this Persian Gulf. They will reach peak top of that place. From there, by road, the merchandise would very easily reach the Mediterranean Sea. They will just cross the top of the what is Saudi Arabia today, between Saudi Arabia and Iraq. These cities used to be very famous cities also. Okay, in Iraq you had Baghdad and so on, and then further north you had Samarkand, etc. So from here they would reach the Mediterranean Sea, and within Mediterranean Sea, here is Greece. Somewhere here is Greece. So they would sail into the very safe waters of Mediterranean Sea and reach the Spain, France, Italy, etc. This used to be the route. Okay. Of course, something happened that this route got broken. So we will come in a minute. But there were also other events which happened, which really forced the Europeans to find a road to India. And why was India so important? Could they not live without India? You might ask. Any idea why they were so much bothered about India? Or every European, they did not really bother about anything else more than India. Do you know why?
Because there was probably a lot of knowledge there, and they want to.
There was a lot of like
Or the
gold,
wealth and spices.
Wealth and
All that
spices
wealth.
and everything.
Spices and wealth.
gold.
And things other people did.
So you should know, I'm jumping. I'll come back to this slide again, but I'm jumping quickly. This graph is the graph of world economics, world GDP, okay, gross domestic product, GDP, of different countries in the world over multiple centuries. Okay, since year one, okay, so last 20 years. And different colors, they mark how much is the GDP of each country. Now, some of you might be not aware of what GDP is. So GDP, or the gross domestic product, it is a measure, it's a economic measurement of how much is the size of an economy. Okay, so richer a country, more the GDP of that country, and less rich the country, less will be the GDP of that country. And then there are more complex measurements like per capita GDP, which is GDP divided by population of that country. So how much is the wealth of one person? Each individual is how much wealthy. That's another measure. But more the GDP of a country, more in general be the richness, wealth, and economics of that country. Generally, that's the measure of GDP. So historians and economics experts, they have calculated for each century how much was the GDP of important countries, China, India, and entire Western Europe, other countries like Japan, etc. And if you notice, almost from year 1 to year 1500, in fact up to perhaps year 1700 even, this red color, this is China. Okay, this is China, this is India. This green color, this is Japan. This gray color, this is Russia. This light blue is Germany, then Italy, then Spain, United Kingdom, and this green at the bottom, which appears after 1700, is the United States. So this graph tells you how much was the size of production of not only spices, it was production of cotton, production of food grains, production of sugar, production of even more costly materials such as diamonds and gold. Okay, so how much was each country producing? And you can see that from year 1 to year 1500, India's share was almost between 25% of the whole world to 27-28% of the whole world. It was never less than 1/4 of the entire world. And India's population also always was about 1/4, and its GDP was also around 1/4. 1/4 is the minimum number. Sometimes it used to be up to 27-28% also. So in this year 1500, when we are talking about the discovery of America, discovery of India, so-called, at that time, India was simply the richest country in the world. So why would Europe be trying to look for India? To, of course, find goods. There was no spices produced in Europe. Even the cotton used to come, not only cotton, in fact, processed clothes used to be imported from India. Wool, leather, so many other things, they used to be imported. Indian stuff was considered the most...
And they had like different teeth.
Go ahead.
I was just saying that they had like spices like tea, like that, like stuff we use every day.
Yeah, absolutely. It used to be essential. If India was cut off from them, their daily life would be coming to a standstill. Absolutely. Now tea came later, so tea was not there in 1500. Tea came later, but you are absolutely right. The very basic spices without which they cannot cook food, the medicines which they need for their well-being, clothes even. Okay, in Europe they were not going to produce cotton, therefore clothes were coming from India also. Okay, and so many other very essential things for life, day-to-day life, not luxury, day-to-day life, used to come from India.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did they in India there were like small villages, right? Was there anyone who was the first person to build a house?
I could not hear you. Sorry, repeat that again.
So there was a lot of villages in India, right? But was there anyone who actually like a house, had a house like modern day, like except without the lights and all? But was there anyone who had a house?
India and China were the important sources of their day-to-day life, their essential thing. And if that the road is somehow cut off between Europe and India and China, then their own lives would be miserable and their economy will crumble. So like in our own time, for example, America, as you know, is dependent on China for so many essential things. You know that, right? Your day-to-day life in America is dependent on supply from China. If supply stops from China, then so many things will stop because you are dependent in America on supply from China. Same way, not same way actually, it was far, far more worse situation for Europe in 1500s. They were totally dependent on China and India, not just for manufacturing of things, but even technology. Europe was living in what is known as dark ages. Europe was not a good place. If you went to Europe in 1400s, you would be not a very happy tourist. Okay, so it was not a very nice place. It used to be very violent, very dirty. There used to be riots based on fanaticism. The scientists used to be killed. You know that, right? It was in 1400s and 1500s that in Europe, church used to simply prosecute the scientists for saying some facts like Earth is not flat, Earth is round, and that Earth revolves around the sun. Sun does not revolve around the Earth, because Bible says the other way around. The scientists who contradicted Bible, they would be said that either shut up or you will be prosecuted. So they used to be burnt. There were multiple scientists which were in this century only burnt by the church. So something happened, and let's quickly come to what happened. In year 1453, remember this date, 1453, there was a very major event that took place in Europe. There used to be this city called Constantinople. Constantinople. Can everybody say that word? Constantinople.
Constantinople.
Constantinople was the capital city of the so-called Byzantine Empire. Which empire? Byzantine. Byzantine Empire was the Christian empire on the borders of Asia and Europe. So the modern day Turkey, again, go back to the map so you understand what I'm talking about. You can see my map?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, let me just zoom in a little bit. You can still see?
Yeah.
Okay. So here is India. Okay, so there was no Pakistan. There was, sure, there was no Afghanistan even. Okay, all of this was considered India. Here, you see Turkey. This whole area was called, here, right here, where you see Istanbul. Istanbul was back then called Constantinople. And this whole area where you see Bulgaria, south of it, Greece, Turkey, this was all part of a big, very powerful empire called Byzantine Empire. Okay, and they used to be Christians, and they used to be like frontiers of Europe and Asia, and they used to be considered like successors of the Roman Empire. Okay, Roman Empire, as you know, was the richest empire of Europe for a very long time. And after the crumbling of Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, which was successor of the Roman Empire in a way, that had been ruling for very long time, several centuries. And the times that we are talking about, for at least 400 years or so, there were continuous wars between Christians and Muslims. So this whole Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the area in the south, here, this was all the Muslim area. Egypt. In the south, all of these were Muslim areas, and north, this used to be up to Turkey. They used to be all Christian areas. So since Israel was not there back then, Jerusalem was considered the holy sacred land by the Christians. They used to, different kings of Europe, they would, with their armies collected together, they would often invade the Middle East Asia. It used to be called crusades. Okay, and those crusades and those kings and warriors who were part of the crusades, they used to be called crusaders. Okay, have you heard this word crusade or crusader?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We have to write an essay about it.
you did write an essay about it. Very good. So these crusades and crusaders, they used to be Christian kings of Europe, Catholic, of course. There used to be nobody else but Catholics back then in Europe. So Catholics of Europe, they would come together, and they would all the way, they will come via this whole area, Turkey and all. They'll invade Syria, Jordan, Israel, these areas, north of Arabia. This area they wanted to conquer always. And there were multiple wars. But in this 1453, a great thing happened, that the Muslim king of Turkey, okay, his name was Muhammad. So named after the prophet of Islam, Muhammad II. So Muhammad II, he was a great Muslim warrior. He defeated the Constantinople, okay, the Christian king, Constantine the 11th, his name was. So he defeated Constantine, and here where you see Istanbul, this is Constantinople city. So that is a huge story, and there are movies and TV series, etc., made on that. You can, if you get a chance, watch some of those. But ultimately, result was that Christians were totally defeated, and this whole area, this whole entire area, was captured by Muslims. So when Muslims captured this area, that event is a catastrophic event for Europe for various reasons. Okay, but the biggest reason, of course, is the religious reason. They totally lost control over their sacred and holy lands like Jerusalem, etc. Okay, and this picture, how many of you have seen this picture recently? Can somebody tell me what is that picture?
That is the Hagia Sophia.
That is absolutely correct. What can you tell about Hagia Sophia? Can somebody tell more?
It was originally built as a church, but now it was recently opened as a Muslim place of worship, as a mosque.
Okay, okay, good, good. So absolutely, this building is called Hagia Sophia. Okay, it was, by the way, not built originally as a church. Remember that always. It was built in 500s. Sure, you can say built as a church, but built by non-Christians, by the pagans. Okay, people who were not Christians. Even the architect was not a Christian. They were pagans worshipping the devatas, just like we Hindus worship. Okay, Christians call those people pagans. They had not converted to Christianity, and it was built by breaking down temples which were there on this same place. So written histories record that Christians built a church on top of the remains of the deities of the pre-Christian pagans, and its architect and its main and engineering came from the pagans only. So anyway, it was created as a church, and it remained a church till 1453. And as soon as Muhammad II, or Mehmet as he is known in the Turkish language, Mehmet II, when he conquered Constantinople, same day evening, he didn't even wait, same day evening, he went to this Hagia Sophia church, and he recited namaz there. Namaz is the Islamic prayer. So with all his army men, he immediately stormed this church and converted that into a mosque. And that event became kind of symbolic victory of Islam over Christianity. Okay, so you should, that's not good. So you should know that Islam has that behavior pattern that wherever they go, whichever country, okay, they try to convert not only the people but also the places of worship of the native belief systems, convert that into mosque. No other country would have seen this more clearly than India. Okay, so also recently in last few days only, you have seen this Rama Janma Bhoomi temple construction started, this event. How many of you?
Yeah,
You did.
I
You
saw
did.
it.
I saw it.
Exactly. So the history of that temple is not very different from Hagia Sophia. Okay, very parallel. So in 1453, they converted this church into mosque. Less than 100 years later, a grand temple of Sri Ramachandra in Ayodhya was raised down by a person called Babar. Okay, 70 or 75 years after Hagia Sophia. Okay, there was a grand temple for centuries. They demolished that, and from the bricks, from the stones, from the material itself that they recovered from there, they converted that into a mosque. Okay, and then again, I will not go into detailed history of that, but ultimately this month, thank God, Hindus got possession of that land and have started reconstruction of another grand temple for Sri Ramachandra. But India has more than 40,000, 40,000 such temples converted into mosques, where if you go, you will be able to clearly see that it was definitely, it doesn't even look like a proper mosque. You will see the murtis of devatas on the walls. You can see on the foundation inscriptions in Sanskrita. You can even see very clearly Ganesha and Devi even, for example. Once they captured this whole Constantinople, then there were few things that happened. So one was, of course, that they lost connect with India, therefore their local economy started suffering. But there were more things than that. Since this place, Constantinople, and this whole Byzantine Empire, it controlled Greece and all these Mediterranean places, where actually there used to be a lot of learning and knowledge, which had gone from India. Do not forget that. If you read Wikipedia or if you read your textbooks, they will not tell you that. But the knowledge of Byzantine was very clearly Eastern. It was very, very clearly Indian even. So be it medicine, be it mathematics, be it even chess or basic, way of doing simple things. Okay, all of that was from India. So these scholars who were living in the Constantinople and near around areas, they fled. Why did they flee? Can somebody tell me? Why did they flee?
Because the Muslims were destroying.
They
their
were destroying.
Yeah, they were destroying the culture.
Absolutely. So they would of course destroy the libraries. They would destroy the universities, but they would actually kill the scholars. That was the first thing they would do. So they fled. They took hundreds, maybe thousands of books and fled.
But
Where
why
did they
flee?
go?
Why not fight?
What's that?
Why flee? Why not fight?
Why not fight? They can't fight. If their kings could not protect them, how can scholars fight? Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so they fled and they went mostly to Italy, France, Germany, all the Western European countries, but mostly Italy. Italy was Venice and Rome, and these places were still peaceful compared to what they were seeing here. So they settled down there. So with that, in Europe, there was a suddenly new revolution that happened. As I told you, till 1400s, it was a dark age in Europe. Complete dark age. There was no economy. It used to be horrible place. There was nothing called culture. It is then suddenly there is something called Renaissance that happened. Okay, some of you might have read about Renaissance, but Renaissance is that event in Europe starting with 1400, around 1400s, where a new type of culture, new intellectual discoveries, new scientific inquiry, mathematics, physics, poetry, again knowledge which even the Europe had from Roman and Greek times. Okay, that knowledge also they started rediscovering. They started reading their own epics. So just like we have Ramayana and Mahabharata, of course Europe also had Virgil, Aeneid, Homer's literature like Iliad and Odyssey. So Europe started connecting with their roots, which were blocked for more than 1,000 years by the Christianity. Okay, so there were a lot of very revolutionary ideas. Painters like Leonardo da Vinci happened. So they 100 years, starting with 1453 to 1553 or so, was a very revolutionary time. A lot of inquiry happened because of this, in a way, directly because of this loss of Byzantine Empire and Constantinople. Then church became weaker because church lost the war by the Muslims. Church also became weaker. Okay, they lost a lot of money as well. They even after losing Constantinople, do you know the Pope and all? They used to be actually warriors. So today, if you think of Pope, who is the ultimate official of all the Catholic Catholic religion, back in 1400s and 1500s, just imagine he used to ride on a horse and go to wars. So Pope, etc., they were warriors and politicians. Okay, being religious is one part, but they were warriors and politicians, and they lost control because the Muslims defeated them. Okay, lot of Spain became Muslim. You know that? Lot of the Spain and the southern part of Europe became totally Muslim. Hungary and even as far as Austria, just borders to Germany, these places became Muslims. So Christian church lost control, and if they lost control politically, in the social life also, they lost control. And therefore, there were a lot of all these Protestants, etc. Very soon, Protestant reformist Christians, etc. will happen. So remember that. So all of that created an industrial revolution soon after. Scientific discoveries, manufacturing, and not exactly industrial revolution in 1400s, but definitely demand for new material, etc. All of that is why they started looking for India. Does that answer? Why they were looking for India? Any questions so far before we proceed, or even a discussion? So feel free. Today is not a very specific agenda, so go ahead. Thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did the Muslims go all the way to Austria? It's a landlocked country. So
Yeah.
did they go through like Italy and Spain?
Absolutely. So if you see here, so they got this. They got Istanbul. They got control of Greece and all this, Bulgaria, Romania. Okay. So don't forget this Count Dracula story. Do you know Count Dracula story? Has anybody seen that movie,
Yeah.
Dracula?
Yes.
No.
No? Okay, you should. Maybe elder ones amongst you should watch that Dracula movie. Dracula was at this time, okay, he was a king or a prince of Romania. And he was so cruel, he was called, I forget, something impaler. Because when he will catch his enemies, which used to be Muslims mostly, he would impale them. Okay, I don't want to get into that violence, but very bloody history. So yes, absolutely. By road, they will go to Romania, then Hungary, and that's where they come in contact with Austria.
Who stopped them? Who stopped them?
Say that again. Who stopped them?
Yeah.
Nobody could stop them. That's what the point is. So they went all the way there, and then of course when the Christians were pushed all the way up to here, then they started pushing back. There were wars, And in 1500s, there was a very great war. And the entire Spain here, this part, again,
You mean
remember,
West?
see, this was also a Muslim area, Algeria, Morocco, Libya, Egypt, this were all Muslims. This was all part of the Caliphate. Okay, Caliphate is the global Muslim rule. Khalifat, it is in Arabic, it is called Khilafat. Okay, in English, they call it Caliphate, global Islamic kingdom. So, global Islamic kingdom or Khilafat was up to here. And through this, they entered the Spain also. So, in 1500s, this whole area, south of it, okay, it was controlled by them. It was called Andalusia by Arabics. Andalusia, remember these terms, maybe note it down, although we will repeat it in some other class later. But from two prong, one from the Spain and other from this side, okay, some of these, all the way up to the borders of Hungary, etc., Austria, etc., they reached. Yes, from the land. At least Spain here, this was conquered again by the Christians. And when it was conquered, they forced all the Muslims of the Andalusia or Spain to convert back to Christianity, either convert or be killed. So when Vasco da Gama, when Vasco da Gama reached India, by the way, I should mention an interesting thing not many people tell you. The last name there, Pedro Alvarez Cabral, he is just like Christopher Columbus is supposed to have discovered America. This guy, Pedro Alvarez Cabral, is supposed to have discovered Brazil in South America. Okay, he has the same status as Columbus, just about 10 years after Columbus. So this guy, Pedro Alvarez Cabral, after discovering, do you know what happened? He straight went to India, loaded with 13 ships and 1,500 soldiers. Okay, so in fact, again, I want to tell you so many such things where you will realize that actually America is a shadow of India, quite honestly, very clearly. America is a shadow of India. We will talk about that much later, hopefully. I don't know when the time will permit. But even some of the, for example, Lord Cornwallis, does anybody know this name? Cornwallis, does anybody know?
No.
No? Okay. So a lot of army officers that the George Washington defeated in the War of American Independence from the British, do you know what used to happen to those officers? They used to be sent to India. These folks used to simply go to India. So entire British army of America went to India. So history of America and history of India are so much closely connected, from Christopher Columbus to Pedro Alvarez to even Cornwallis and others who were actually direct losing party in America. They went and fought for British in India against Indians. Okay, anyway. So when all these events were happening, what was the political configuration of India? So in India, often if you hear what happened before British, what is the general answer you will get if somebody asks you? Before British, who was ruling India? So before British became the paramount power in India, who was ruling India?
Muslims.
Muslims, yeah. I mean, no, that's correct actually. That's the answer you will get. Mughals, Muslims.
Yeah, Mongols.
Yeah, Mughals or Muslims, most of, because that's what the impression is given. Okay, so forget about this map. This map is from 1500s. I want to show you the map of 1760. Okay, so British power is supposed to have started from an event called the War of Plassey. Okay, which happened in 1757. Okay, so War of Plassey, 1757. Around that, if you look at the map of India, this is the map of India, and in that, this central yellow portion, this whole area, yellow portion, Do you know who is controlling this part of the land? These are
The
Marathas.
Mughals?
No, Marathas. Okay, Mughals are one dot here, that's all, Delhi. Delhi is the only thing Mughals are controlling. This whole yellow portion of India are Marathas. Do you know who is ruling this green portion on the northwest part of India, for which so many from Maurya Empire and Chandragupta and all fought Punjab and northwest? Do you know who was ruling?
No.
Not right then in 1760, but within 20 years after that, Sikh will emerge in the northwest. This whole green area, north part of it, and even the south part of it, these are the Sikhs. Here, this whole green thing is the Sikh Empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And then who was ruling this Gujarat area? Gujarat area was being ruled by another Hindu king called Gaikwad, who was under protection of Marathas as well. Here, this pink area, this is also not Muslims. This is sure, for part of this history at this time, it had been usurped by a king called Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. But before Hyder Ali and after Tipu Sultan, total period being something like 50-60 years. Other than that, this whole area also was ruled by the Hindu kings. Same thing on the border coastal areas of Kerala. These were all Hindu kings. Here, this green area is what is known as Nizam or Hyderabad, Nizam of Hyderabad's kingdom. That was Muslim area. In Bengal, there was a Muslim sultan, okay, who was again kind of a puppet of the Marathas only. And this was Awadh. Awadh was Lucknow and that whole area. These three were primarily the Muslim kingdoms. Other than that, who was ruling India? Marathas, Sikhs, this whole Nepal, you see here Nepal, this was a very powerful Himalayan kingdom right from here up to here. Okay, so there was a very strong Hindu king, just like Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. There was another king called Prithvi Narayana Shah. He united all the Himalayan kingdoms all the way up to the borders of Kashmir on one end and north of Bengal, etc. on the other, and created a huge empire called Nepal. So which is why when you might have heard in recent news that the Prime Minister of Nepal wants to claim so many things. Actually, that pride of Nepal comes from this age only, that the Nepal became a very powerful kingdom. So in this map, I want you to clearly understand that the Muslim ruled area is less than, I would say, 15% of India. Yes, so Awadh and Bengal, these are Muslim ruled. This green area is Muslim ruled. This is Hyderabad. Rest of it is completely Hindu ruled. When the war of Plassey, Battle of Plassey happened. So again, if I ask you the question, who did the British took the reins of power from? You should never say Mughals or Muslims. Who did they really take the power from? Hindus.
Us.
Okay. Any questions about this topic?
That's interesting.
They have always told you that Mughals were ruling and then the British were ruling. No, not correct. In between, the Mughals were finished and over, and before the British started, there's a period of almost 100 years, just less than 100 years, but almost 100 years. And that 100 years was the revival of the Hindu self-rule, Swarajya. Okay. So anyway, when the Europeans arrived in India, they created in Europe, they created companies. So British people, they created something called British East India Company. Similarly, Portugal, they created Portuguese East India Company. People of Holland, they created a company called Dutch East India Company. Denmark people, they created a Danish East India Company. So these multiple East India Company were created. These companies really were small, you can say, mini governments. These were business governments. responsible for overseeing the entire supply chain of goods from India. So they used to own ships, they used to own their own military, they used to own their own lawyers and their own diplomats and so on. And when they arrived in India, again, I want you to very clearly understand who are they dealing with. So this is the map of India, almost modern map of India, on top of which I have noted down who was the ruling power in around year 1500. Who is doing this doodling? Is it fun? If it is fun, I will also try. Don't do that, please. So, can you delete that yourself? I don't want to do it. Clean up after you, please. So, map of India was looking like this. Let's start from south. So Vasco da Gama, when he reached India, where did he come to? Which city do you know? He came to a place called Calicut. Calicut is here in Kerala, where my dot is. And generally, this entire South India was a very powerful kingdom under Vijayanagara Empire or the Carnatic Empire. Okay, and father of the great king Krishna Devaraya, he was ruling over this vast empire. Krishna Devaraya, his son, he was already a teenager when Vasco da Gama would have reached India, but he was not yet a king. He was just a young prince. Soon, Krishna Devaraya would become the king, and this empire will see great golden age. We will talk about all that much later. But in the north, the greatest king was the very great Rajput king called Maharana Sangram Singh, also known as Maharana Sanga. He was grandfather of another great person, Maharana Pratap. Okay, so Maharana Sanga was ruling over a very vast Rajput area, and all these Muslim kings. So the green patches here in Gujarat, there was a Bahmani empire just north of Vijayanagara, and there was an Ahmadnagar. And of course, there was a Delhi Sultanate, which was much smaller in size at that time, because Maharana Sanga had recaptured most of the northwestern areas. Okay, and the Delhi Sultanate also was now being ruled by Afghans. So we don't worry about too much about who was doing what, because that's not the main point of this slide. What I want to know is that almost 50% of India was already ruled by Hindus, and they were also continuously increasing the self-rule. So these green patches you see in between were shrinking very quickly. Maharana Sanga had defeated Gujarat. Similarly, Krishna Devaraya subsequently defeated the Bahmanis. Bahmanis were wiped out. Okay, so very soon, as the Europeans reached India, Hindus were already fighting a war of independence of a kind, of recreating the Hindu rule by pushing out the Muslims. Just like in Europe, that kind of war was being fought between the Christians and Muslims. There was a similar kind of a situation, not exactly like that, but similar in India as well. Okay, so these Europeans started trading, and again, not today, later, we will talk about how they became more and more powerful, while in parallel, this war of independence that I talked about in South and as well as in North was going on, okay, for Swaraj. And Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj will soon happen, who kind of created a bridge between Vijayanagara and Rajput. Okay, so he was both, you know, representative of Vijayanagara on one hand, and actually he was a Rajput anyway from his ancestry. So any question about this? Point of this slide was to tell you, when the Europeans arrived in India at the beginning of 1500, okay, who was controlling India? Who was that they dealt with? Any questions, points, thoughts?
So why do the people in like our textbooks say that only the Muslims were ruling, and then the British came in?
So yes, so good question. The textbooks are written from the point of view to make you think that Hindus are defeatist people. Hindus have always lost the wars. Okay, Hindus are pacifists who simply sit back and let whoever comes kind of run over them. That is the first impression they want to give you. And in fact, it is for that purpose only. They want to tell you that Ashoka was such a peaceful person. And, Dharma tells you not to be violent, sing kirtan and sit at home, that kind of stuff. Reality is very different. Reality is that all the times when the golden and most peaceful and most prosperous and happy times of India was, always it was a product of a very powerful, armed and active Hindu armies and warriors and great kings. Without them, there is no happiness, prosperity, or wealth. That Kshatriya spirit, so that it goes away from Hindus, is why they teach you that, okay, British came, before that Muslims were there. Before Muslims came, other foreigners were there. Even when Hindus are successful, they are successful through peaceful means like Ashoka was, things like those. Those are myths, those are not realities. Any other point? Yeah. Okay, so I have to tell you that tomorrow, please, we need to all be present and bring your friends too. It's a matter of prestige for us. There is a great scholar who is coming out to talk to us, and he is going to present to us about his research on the history and architecture and economic and social purpose of the temples in Tamil Nadu. So to make it worth his time, I think least we can do is to all of us attend. Okay, that's all I had for today. We still have 5 minutes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So you said there were like other camps from some Samskara Foundation. When are they going to start, and how can I sign up for them?
So yeah, I think I will share a link, which is a Facebook link, Facebook page of Samskara Foundation. All the announcement for new programs would be published on Facebook. So ask your parents, or if you have a Facebook login, then you yourself like the page of Samskara Foundation. So you will that way not miss any announcement of new program.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other question about the topic? So if not, let us recite that shloka once again. Gayanti deva kil geetakani.
Gayanti deva
Dhanyastu te bharat bhumi bhage. Swarga pavargaspada hetu bhute. Bhavanti bhuyah purushah suratvat. Let us do the Shanti mantra. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Okay, thank you everyone for joining today and giving me the opportunity.
Thank
you.
Namaste. Thank you. Namaste.
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 Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.